The email lands at 6:11 in the morning, before you've had coffee, on the laptop that has never once connected to Castleton's network. Subject line: Covenant Compliance Review. Payroll Variance Flag. Response required by Friday. Redfield Commercial's asset-based lending group has flagged an unexplained internal transfer, dated 11 days ago, moving one salaried position out of the current reduction model without a documented business justification on file. They don't have a name attached to the position yet. They have a dollar figure, a position code, and a timestamp of 11:40 at night, which the analyst notes, without editorializing, is an unusual hour for a routine transfer to be filed. You already know exactly which transfer they mean because you filed it yourself, and you already know that if you can't produce a justification Redfield accepts by Friday, they treat it as evidence. The whole reduction model was manipulated, grounds to revisit the entire covenant package on their terms instead of yours. You close the laptop. You go to work. You are the seventh chair at a table built for 6 visible names. Vera Kessler stands at the head of the room, a stack of printed pages squared off in front of her, the laptop beside her closed and dark the way it always is. Vera does not read numbers off a screen. She never has. She prints everything the night before, highlights it by hand, and reads from paper like the paper itself is the thing that makes a number true. You have watched her do this in 11 meetings over the past 2 years, and you have never once seen her open that laptop in front of a room. Today, the numbers are head count. Castleton Packaging employs 206 people across 3 shifts, and Vera is walking the operations committee through a reduction that will bring that number down to 178. 28 positions. She says the phrase realignment of production capacity, and nobody in the room corrects her, because that is the phrase that was emailed to all of them 9 days ago. And repeating it back is easier than saying the word layoff out loud in a conference room with the blinds open. You take notes in a spiral notebook nobody will ever ask to read. Across from you, Doug Fenner, the plant operations director, taps a mechanical pencil against a printed org chart, watching names disappear under Vera's marker 1 row at a time. You built this company's holding structure 4 years ago. You own 91% of it through an entity with a name that appears on no badge, no email signature, and no door in this building. This morning, the system you personally approved to protect Castleton's margin is sitting inside a compliance flag with your fingerprints on it, and you have 4 days to decide what you're willing to put in writing. Vera reaches the fabrication floor names first. Position by position, she reads them the way she reads everything: flat, precise, treating each line as a fact rather than a decision. A packaging line supervisor named Ray's gone. His severance calculated at 8 weeks, $13,200. A number Vera reads without pausing, the way she reads every number. Like a fact, and not a person's mortgage payment. You do the math anyway, the way you always do. 8 weeks, not enough to cover a full quarter of anything. You think about Reyes's 2 kids, whose names you know only because you once overheard him on the phone in the parking lot, negotiating a payment plan for orthodontia with a receptionist who clearly wasn't budging. You sit there with your pen against the paper, and for a long, uncomfortable stretch, you genuinely do not know if the decision you are watching unfold is the right one. You built the staffing model. You approved the target headcount. You told yourself, alone, at your kitchen table 3 weeks ago, that Castleton could not survive another year carrying a payroll that outpaced its margin by $400,000 annually, and that the alternative to a controlled reduction now was an uncontrolled one in 18 months, when the bank covenant tightened and there would be no severance for anyone. You still believe that. You are not sure it makes watching this easier, and this morning it comes with a second question stacked on top of the first. Whether the one thing you did that wasn't purely arithmetic is about to cost you the whole deal. You have run the covenant math more times than you can count, and it never comes out kinder. The bank's leverage ratio requirement tightens from 4.5 times EBITDA to 3.75 times EBITDA at the 18-month mark, and at current payroll, Castleton misses that number by roughly $600,000 of annual savings. A covenant breach doesn't ask politely for 28 jobs. It takes all 206 at once, on a timeline set by a bank's legal department instead of a severance schedule you personally reviewed line by line. You still sit here and feel it as a decision being done to 28 specific people instead of a number that prevented something worse happening to 206. Both framings are true. Neither one tells you what to write in a memo to an analyst who thinks the whole model might be compromised. Doug looks down the table at you. Not suspicious, just tired, the way people look at whoever's closest when they need someone to agree with them. You've been in ops longer than any of us, he says. Does this number feel right to you? It is not an accusation. But for one full second, your pulse does something ugly, because the question sits closer to the truth than Doug will ever know it sits, on a day when a bank analyst is already asking the same question in a different font. You keep your voice level, say the number matches what operations sent down 2 months ago, nothing more, and Doug nods and moves the pencil to the next line. The question sits in you longer than it should. You are not in ops longer than any of them. Not really. You are ops, invisibly, at a level none of them have a name for. The gap between what Doug thinks he asked and what he actually asked is the entire architecture of the last 4 years of your life, and you closed it with a sentence about a spreadsheet. On the same day, you have to decide how much of that architecture to put in writing for a stranger at Redfield. Vera keeps reading. Fabrication, gone. Warehouse, gone. She reaches a name near the bottom of page 3, and this is the one your pen stops moving for. Quality inspector, second shift, 4 years with the company. You know the desk that goes with the title without needing the page to tell you. A photograph of a rescue dog, a one-eyed terrier mix, taped inside the laptop lid. Angled, so she sees it every time she opens the machine. You have walked the floor enough times, badge reading operations coordinator, to have seen it a dozen times without anyone thinking twice about who was looking. Vera says the line has the lowest output per hour on second shift, 31 units below the shift average, and that the position is recommended for elimination under the new staffing model. Then she stops, frowns, flips back a sheet, flips forward again. This one's marked pending review, she says, mostly to herself. Still showing active as of Tuesday. No resolution on file. Doug shrugs. Says maybe HR systems didn't sync with the transfer log. These things lag sometimes, and moves to the next line without much interest. Nobody looks at you. You keep your eyes on your notebook and write nothing, because the resolution Vera doesn't have on file is sitting on your kitchen counter with a Friday deadline attached to it. And you are the only person in this building who knows those two facts are the same fact. What nobody at this table understands, watching Vera's marker move down page 3, is the version of Castleton that existed 4 years ago. Before you bought it through a holding company, nobody here has ever heard of. Back then, the plant ran at 58% capacity utilization with 240 employees, bleeding cash at a rate that would have closed the doors within 30 months, regardless of what anyone in this room decided today. You didn't take an operations badge and start walking this floor because you wanted to watch people lose jobs up close. You did it because every projection your finance team built from the outside was wrong in ways that only became visible from inside a break room. Listening to which machines actually broke down twice a shift and which supervisors covered for each other's numbers. 6 weeks ago, before any of this reduction model existed on paper, you stood behind that same inspection station for 11 minutes while its second shift inspector caught a seal defect on a case of protein bar cartons that the automated scanner had missed twice in a row. She didn't know you were watching in any capacity that mattered. To her, you were operations coordinator, the guy who occasionally walked the floor with a clipboard. She held up the flawed carton, showed you the hairline gap in the seal, and said, "This is the third one this month the machines missed. Somebody should look at the calibration before we're the ones explaining a bad batch to a client." You did look at the calibration. It was off by a margin small enough that Castleton's own quality software had rated it acceptable, and large enough that, projected across a full production run, it would have cost the company an estimated $61,000 in returns and client penalties over a year. Nobody asked you to run that projection. You ran it anyway. The way you run most numbers, nobody assigns you, alone, at night, because the habit stopped being optional a long time ago. That is what the 1140 transfer actually was. Not a favor, a materials audit function you built. because the audit gap it fills costs Castleton real money every year. Nobody else had bothered to trace. You moved the second shift inspector into it 4 days before the reduction list was finalized, using an internal account with your operations credentials, because the arithmetic justified the role independent of whose name went in it. It happened to also mean a one-eyed terrier named Pepper keeps getting fed on a materials auditor's salary instead of an unemployment check. Both things are true at once, and Redfield doesn't care about either version unless you can prove the first one in writing. The meeting breaks. Chairs push back. Doug gathers his org chart. Vera stacks her pages into a folder and tells the room she'll have transition letters ready by Friday, the same Friday sitting at the top of the email on your kitchen counter. Though she doesn't know that, and there's no version of this afternoon where you tell her. You sit for a moment, after most people have filed out, the way you always do, letting the room empty before you do. That night, you draft the memo twice. The first version says nothing about calibration reports or defect margins, just the transfer's effective date and a line about operational necessity, vague enough to protect the fact that you authorized it. You delete it, because vague is exactly what a manipulated model looks like from the outside. The second version is the true one. $61,000 in annual returns and client penalties tied to a calibration drift nobody else had traced, a materials audit role built to fix it, a transfer executed under standing authority you've held since the acquisition closed. It names the position. It does not name you, because the operations account was never built to. You attach the quality report, the calibration data, the $61,000 projection, every number that made the decision true before it ever touched a person, and you send it at 11:15, 25 minutes earlier in the evening than the timestamp that started all of this. The response comes back Thursday afternoon. 3 lines. Unremarkable. The kind of email that ends a threat without ever describing the shape it almost took. Justification accepted. Flag cleared. Covenant review proceeds as scheduled. You read it twice, the way you read the termination adjacent version of this same building 4 days earlier, and then you close the laptop and don't open it again that night. This is what a headcount reduction actually looks like from the inside of it. It is not a memo or a percentage or a phrase like realignment of production capacity, and it is not, in the end, a single dramatic threat that either lands or doesn't. It is a woman named Vera reading numbers off paper because paper feels more honest than a screen. It is a man named Doug asking an honest question at exactly the wrong moment and never knowing how close it landed. It is 27 people whose names you approved leaving, one name you pulled off the list 11 days before anyone read it out loud, and a second, quieter fight nobody in that room will ever know happened at all. Fought entirely in writing against an analyst who never learned there was a person behind the position code. Only that the numbers, when someone finally showed their work, turned out to be true. The room believes it watched a committee make a decision that Thursday afternoon. What actually happened was smaller and stranger than that, and it happened twice. Once in a kitchen, 3 weeks earlier, deciding a transfer was worth the arithmetic, and once again on a Wednesday night at the same counter, deciding the arithmetic was worth defending in writing rather than hiding behind a vaguer sentence that would have been easier to send. Nobody will ever put either version in a transition letter. Nobody needs to. You get in your car, and the plant's security lights click on behind you 1 row at a time, the way they do every night, whether or not anyone is left inside to see them.